Welcome back to Jacking In with Geography. This is your host, Jack Felson, and today we have a pretty special episode talking about how pools could be a bit more eco-friendly. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking more about two specific pools, one being Birchmount Community Center, the one I work at, and Pam McConnell in Regent Park, a pool that I've worked at 2 summers ago, and that it is a bit more modern than Birchmount, and we're going to be looking at the key distinctions between these two pools. This is a pretty specific topic that I find does not get talked about a lot, and today we are going to be talking about it because I like niche, I like unique, and I think this stuff is unique, and I'm very connected to this issue as well, as I do work for the City of Toronto, as I've discussed in the Water is Life episode. So today we're going to be talking about how these pools affect the ecosystems that they're in. And I don't think a lot of people do think about this when they go to the pool. I mean, I think they go to the pool and have fun, or even facility staff or people who make these, people who have made these pools in the past weren't really thinking about them. I think now, more as we get into a bit more modern things, and we'll talk about that more, it is a bit more modern and people are having these eco initiatives in mind, but most community centers in Toronto are older, so they do not have as much eco initiatives in mind, if any. So just if you're new, my name is Jack Felson. I am a high school student at Danforth Collegiate Institute. I'm a lifeguard and swim instructor for the City of Toronto. And, a pool has always been a third space for me. And in Toronto, I find that it's actually a hard thing because we are such a diverse city that has tons of new stuff and tons of things, parks, places, community centers, libraries, restaurants, so much stuff. So finding that third space is easy, but it's also hard because you might not have a unique third space. But the pool has always been a third space for me, especially in Toronto. I've done swimming lessons. I've been in the water since I was just a baby. I've done swimming lessons for a bit until the point where I finally realized, hey, maybe I can actually swim. So that's when I stopped doing swim lessons. And now, a few years back, I did all my bronzes, did my NL, did my swim instructors, and now I actually work for the City of Toronto. So it's always been there. It's always been a thing. I'm always in the water. I'm reading this book called Eating Dirt, and they talk about permadirt, how this dirt never goes away after you work in these places. And that really inspired me because I think of it as permachlorine because I'm in a pool so much, and the scent of chlorine is fused to my skin because I'm in a pool about 9 hours a day, because as well as working on Wednesdays, I also do go to my local pools and do swimming because it's an awesome workout. But enough about me. Today we're going to be talking about, again, Birchmount Community Center and Pam McConnell. So Birchmount was built in 1993 in partnership with the City of Toronto as well as the Scarborough Lions Club. The Scarborough Lions Club is like a legion, like those types of clubs, but they're around, and this was the Scarborough ones. If you ever been to Birchmount, you would know the Lion Slide that was there. That was actually donated by them as well. So when Birchmount opened up in the 90s, it was a success in Scarborough and was deemed as one of the best indoor pools in Toronto. Fun fact, it was actually an outdoor pool before it got converted into an indoor one. And then today it is still one of the best pools in Toronto, but not in terms of eco initiatives. And this isn't necessarily Birchmount's fault. And why I just said that is that I think throughout this I'll be talking about these pools as if they're people. So if I say it's Birchmount's fault, I'm talking about the pool, but it might sound like I'm talking about a person. But yeah, this pool, it's old, right? It's 30 years old. And back then, I don't really think they were thinking about eco initiatives. as well as they are now. And a good example of this is Pam McCall. As pools have become more modern, so have the people who have made them. At Pam McConnell, or as the aquatic staff call it, PMAC, it was built in 2018 by the city of Toronto and had a design team of over 10 architects, and opened in 2018. It is one of the most modern pools in the six. And if I'm not wrong, I actually think it was the most recent community center to open. There might be one at Scarborough with the French name, but it might be more modern. But I'm pretty sure PMAC it was the most modern. The quality of these pools is tenfold, and each have their own quirks and differences. But PMAC stands out as a clear modern favorite in terms of being more eco-friendly. But why is this? You might be thinking, Jack, this was an insanely long intro, and I'm sorry. And you might think it's a bit of a dumb question. I know my English teacher wouldn't like it either, but I can't think of a better transition. So that's where we're going with. So let's think about why this might be the case. As I mentioned, Birchmount is an older pool, but something happened a bit more recently that I don't want to touch upon because it directly correlates with the environment and what people are doing even now, putting in place that is a bit too human-centric. So over the last summer, there was an industrial-sized dehumidifier that was put in place. And it was put in place because of a group of employees going on strike over the working conditions at Birchmount. Now, you might be thinking, Jack, didn't you say you worked at Birchmount? And yes, I did. I was part of that strike. Did I spearhead it? No, but once you're in a strike, you're kind of part of it. So the dehumidifier was put in to combat the heat and moisture on the pool deck last summer. Humidity is measured by a Humidex reading, and this combines heat as well as overall moisture. So those two combined made the pool deck without the dehumidifier felt like it was 45 degrees on deck. Over long periods of time, this can have some pretty serious health effects like heat stroke, fatigue, and general exhaustion. The city is to have a paramedic on standby if these conditions are too serious. I had never seen a paramedic on deck or at any pool, especially at Birchmount at my time working there last summer. It was just a thing that did not happen. And so you might be thinking, this is probably not conditions that you want lifeguards to have because you might go to the pool and might not be the greatest swimmer, so you kind of trust your life with these people because they are trained, we are trained, especially if you're on the deep end because you might not be the greatest of swimmers. But if you're not a good swimmer, why are you going into the deep end? So essentially, the dehumidifier's job was to get the thick, moist air out of the building and turn it and pump it back into cool air. And this was such a long process to get this thing actually in. But I firmly believe that there's no condition that is too hot to work in. Obviously, yeah, there is, but it honestly, on swear to God, it was not that bad. But it was at the same time. So how going on strike worked is that we basically had to call up our union rep and say, this has been an issue for a while. Let's hash this out. This was probably the biggest snowball effect I've ever seen. As soon as this guy gets here, he locks us in the office away from our supervisor and says to us, you've done the right thing, guys. This is unsafe. You're awesome for doing this. Not a lot of people have the guts to do this, but I'm glad you're doing this. So we're going to call up more people. We're going to get the ministry involved, and we're going to see if we can do something about this. And so by the end of day 2, or actually by the end of day 1, really, we had every major news outlet reporting on this because as well as Birchmount going on strike, Main Square also went on strike. And these are two pools that are pretty popular in the area. Scarborough, I think, being a bit more because it's in the heart of Scarborough, or not in the heart of Scarborough, but in an area that's a bit more populated than I would say Main Square. But still, this was a pretty big thing when it first came out. And this was like few last weeks of July, so pretty peak season in terms of going to a pool. And so this caught mostly every major news outlet in Toronto, and they were all there by the end of day one. And was it a great experience? I mean, it wasn't the best. Did I learn a lot? Yes. And is there more stuff? Yeah, there was a lot. By the end of day one, we had been moved a whole bunch of times. The ministry was still on call to actually show up. The union guy got us pizza, and we were all a bit more confused because we didn't really know what was going on and what we had gotten ourselves into. But just the amount of bureaucracy through this was insane. And by the end of the week, they had finally settled on agreement through countless negotiations, some heated arguments, and a bit of feeling a bit helpless because, again, once you're on strike, you're kind of already on a side. And through like conversations with my dad and my mom, and they helped me out, but really, this was the thing that I'd never experienced before. And so by the end of the negotiations, the union and us, because we were on the union side, versus the ministry and the city, all decided that the dehumidifier would be fast-tracked and installed next week. And so this was kind of crazy, because this was a capital gains project, so this was in the works. But it took this much like bureaucracy and stuff, and so like just so much useless stuff. And I understand that there's probably more going on behind the scenes that I didn't really see, or that was going on that was just happening. But it was honestly, sometimes it was a bit of a shit show. But we got it. We got the dehumidifier. We got a week without pay. But I like to work, so it was kind of a boring week for me. But at least I got the week off. But what was also bad, and this is a bit more human-centric, was that the pool was closed, obviously, because they had to install it. So hundreds of families didn't get to use this pool for weeks. And I hadn't really thought about that until now that I work there, but also people go here. And so closing stuff down isn't the greatest solution to these things, even when our health was at risk. I don't really think that I don't think we could have worked while they were putting it in, but maybe. Overall, it was a mixed bag of emotions, but we got through it. I learned a lot, and hopefully we don't have to go through it again. Now, cut to the present, and the dehumidifier is gone. 1 week it's here, 1 week it's not, and no one really knows why. I asked my boss, I asked my higher-ups. No one can really give me a straight answer. But maybe that is not all bad. I know that I just talked about an insane scenario where it was really weird and we had to shut down, all because it was being too hot. We also experienced like one of the hottest summers last summer, so that also coincided with everything, but now it's gone. And maybe it isn't bad because the dehumidifier was gas powered and did pump a ton of carbon emissions into the air. This thing was on from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day to keep the pool cool, so us aquatic staff wouldn't get heat stroke or heat exhaustion, and so the people on deck washing their kids wouldn't get too hot as well. Now, this is the thing. When we think of human-centric things, we don't really think about the environment. This whole thing of this dehumidifier was only to serve us, right? And it's a bit of a gray area because no one wants to work in those conditions, and it wasn't great, but why does that trump the environment? And so I can't really argue against either of them, because I don't think that they can't really, because like we did need it, but also it does like harm the environment because it is gas powered. So my solution really is to simply change the energy source to be electrical and to run on generators or be solar powered because, well, it's in the summer, it's hot out, it could probably run. Will this cost a bit more money? Yes. Do we know the city has money? Yes. It's public company, like taxpayers. We have this money. Will it probably get changed? No. Do I even know that this thing will come back? I have no idea. Well, we might have to go on strike again this summer? Maybe. Because where did they put this? It's so weird. And the lack of information towards the subject is like abysmal. Well, like, and that strike honestly sent shockwaves throughout the city of Toronto in terms of aquatics. They now do trainings differently. They talk about going on strike. I think one higher up got moved because of it. And so now they take away the thing that caused us to go on strikes. Now we're probably going to go on strike again because of this. And I don't really know what to say because it's really dumb. But if they do bring it back, I would hope that it's electrically powered through generators or solar panels. At the start, this dehumidifier was a thing that was beneficial to us and harmful against the environment. I hope with these changes, if they do decide to bring it back, that it at least could be neutral. Because obviously it's not sequestering carbon, but at least it's not producing any either. And honestly, going through all the bureaucracy of dealing with the union as well as the Ministry of Labor taught me a lot about how real change happens and how the smallest actions, like a simple phone call, can have major snowball effects down the line. Was it all good? Maybe. But no one can really say. Now, I really hope we do get this dehumidifier back, as I really don't want to go on strike again and have to go through this process again. Hopefully, we can learn. Now, at TMAC, they do not have to deal with this. It is clear to see the differences between Birchmount and PMAC if you do go and compare them. But with PMAC being the most modern community center in the six, it has come with more eco initiatives in mind. The biggest one being the green roof on top of the community center. There are loads of shrubs and plants that soak up any rainwater that comes down on the center. This prevents local carbon sequestration as well as runoff into the streets. It is a 2-for-1, if you will. Now, why is this good? Because one is a local carbon sequestration source, so it takes in carbon, especially especially in such a high area, being Regent Park, as well as produces less runoff in the streets because we know flooding is such a big problem in Toronto. Now, in Ontario, a bill was passed so that home pools have to be offset with green space, as home pools are now classified as a hard surface. I want this bill to be extended to every community center in Toronto. I want this bill to be extended to every community center in Toronto. This offset is good for the environment and will take some effort to implement, but not loads. This bill would focus on older pools where hard surfaces run rampant and then green space is lacking. Even if you need more people to run these new green spaces, we are in a youth unemployment crisis and have thousands of youth hungry to join the workforce and get their foot in the door. Facilities isn't talked about a lot in terms of jobs for teens because they deal with like chemicals and responsibilities. But I think that why not? People are capable. You see people with like master's degrees not having jobs because they can't find any. So if we do implement this, more jobs will be open to the people who actually want them. You know, people need jobs, right? And so I find they won't actually really care what kind of jobs that are there because we're in such a crisis. Anyways, another thing great about PMAC is the sheer amount of windows that it has. These windows peer right onto the pool and act as a natural heating and cooling regulator. It's too hot, close the blinds. Too cold, open the blinds. And open some windows, or some of the panes actually open, so airflow can get in, as well as they're positioned so the sun can actually get in. This control leads to an on-deck experience to be more pleasant to both staff and patrons alike, as well as leads to a far greater eco-friendly option without the use of gas-powered dehumidifiers to regulate temperature. Both of these things lead to a better environment for all, both literally and figuratively. Now, another few ideas I have are a bit extreme, but I do think that they're worth thinking about. Kind of list them off. Switching LEDs for lighting. Now, this is small, but it does make up 0.1% of carbon emissions, which is not tons, but small things like that do add up. Limit the heat use of cooling systems or change how the energy is converted. Already talked about that one. Solar panels are maybe a bit expensive, but more renewable down the line and down the road, a bit more eco-friendly. Make it known that these places are TTC accessible. Both Birchmount and PMAC are TTC accessible. You can catch a bus from Main Street or Warden that takes you pretty much right to Birchmount, and you can hop on a streetcar from Broadview, which is the 505, and that will take you directly to Pat McConnell. And so, I mean, most people do know this, because we have phones and we can just look this up. But some people do take cars. Another option is to manage water properly, so no chlorine-filled water in a drainage system. Now, I'm not entirely sure how the drainage system works, but borderline, we just don't want chlorine-filled water in our drinking system. But I don't think it is. But just in case if it is, we can change that. Green roof. This is what I talked about for the whole city. I think, honestly, every community center should have this. This is the easiest thing to implement in terms of workload and just effort to put it in place. If we can do this, it would be awesome. And yeah, just more green space in general. Like, all these things are made out of hard concrete that have parking lots, like roads, like they're all hard surfaces. So offsetting that with more green space in general would be more than ideal. I think this is the most extreme one, is converting to saltwater pools. So the Miles Nadia JCC is the only saltwater pool in Toronto, and it is just better for the environment because it doesn't rely on harsh chemicals like chlorine. And I was thinking about this in tech design. If there is a way so that when you could drain the pool, that energy somehow cools it down and powers the cooling system, that would be cool, but I don't know how that would work. So this is really the main problem, that these older community centers are, old. So replacing built-in systems that have been in use for decades is the hardest part about this. That's why the Green Roofs initiative, I'm going to call it that, would be easier because you're just adding something. You're not changing anything. Going back to the strike, it took 2 months and a shit ton of bureaucracy to add something that was vital for our safety as staff and patrons. So I feel replacing and uprooting these things in place is simply not possible. This might seem a bit bleak, but with all climate things, I think it's important to be realistic on what you can and cannot change. And I think having this lived experience of going through change and seeing how change happens, as like the little guy has shown me that you do have some power in a big fight, but ultimately you don't. And that was really eye-opening. And that's one of the main things I talk about when I'm trying to find power, is that you have to talk to people in power to get real change happen. Like, it has to be seen. I can make this podcast episode and not have it go anywhere. I cannot post it. I could just talk about it and nothing would get done. But if I email high-ranking officials, city council members, maybe Olivia Chow, and post this on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, maybe someone will see it and maybe things will happen. Or it's not even that. It's not even like I think these things will happen, and they should happen, but it's just like, if I can get other people thinking about this, that is inevitably my end goal. It does feel, no, I don't feel it. I know it takes months for something to happen that is human-centric. That dehumidifier was human-centric. It only benefited us. So I just can't imagine how long it would take for something non-ecocentric or something ecocentric to come into existence. Now, you might be thinking, Jack, is there a but? That has been pretty bleak. Yes, there is. But we can't look back on the past, right? These things have happened. We can add things. We can't really change them, but we can add. But we also need to be looking forward and setting PMAC as the standard, and how we can build off the success of that aquatic center is key. So that is really the main goal. We got to move forward and keep thinking about these green initiatives that we can implement to maybe these older pools, as well as just add new ones for our newer pools. Now, I think the environmental stuff has kind of taken a backseat in this podcast, but I was talking to my mom about this, and really, I think the environmental stuff frames the conversation for other things to happen. So I've talked about bureaucracy, unions, new bills being passed, youth unemployment, aging infrastructure, as well as my lived experiences. And I think that's really what we need to talk about with environmental stuff, because environmental things and ecocentric things is not something that happens instantly like that. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of bureaucracy. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of things to happen. Some of these changes will never happen. And that is a hard thing to wrestle with, but I also think it's realistic. So I think what's best is that we focus on tangible ones that can happen. And if we can connect this idea and see the vision for the future, that is how real change will happen. And your voice, the listener, or your voice, the person in power, is a key part of this equation. Because no matter who you are, you can create change. But you have to be realistic, and you have to be smart about it. So on that note, thank you for listening. Be smart, be aggressive, be invincible, and just be you. Because you can change anything if you know what brings you joy, what you're good at, and know an issue that needs to be fixed. That's how I started, and that's how you should as well. I'm Jack Philson. I'm signing off.